All right, so it's time for episode 5, I think. I think it's episode 5 of Robert's Mailbox. So, without further ado, let's jump into it and see what we got. So, right now, I'm just looking at subject lines, and I mentioned this in the previous video, but the two big things that I look for are curiosity and benefit. So, something that I read and that kind of makes me say, like, oh, wow, I wonder what this is about. And then it has another element of like, oh, this is interesting because it will improve my life in some way, right? And maybe those aren't the exact thoughts I'm having, but I can see some sort of benefit for me in reading that email. So those are kind of the two things that when I'm scrolling through subject lines, at least for these videos, those are the two things that I look for. So this one is almost there. Like, I like that there's this personal element of, hey, here's a text that I sent my friend. And again, it feels kind of like you're peeking behind the veil. There's this curiosity element that's really strong. But I would love to know why he thinks I would like it. You know, what is it about this text that is unique or interesting? Hmm. This is cool. I broke down a Ryan Levesque email on the last Roberts Mailbox, though, so I think that unfortunately disqualifies a Ryan Levesque email for today. Hmm. So a suspiciously personal subject line there. Are you coming? Are you going to be at this thing? Hmm. One thing, looking at this email, one thing I'm not crazy about is this opener here. We are in a unique time in history. I'm sure you're at a unique time in your life. So many of us have experienced unexpected challenges over the last few months. To me, that just kind of reads as like, well, duh. Yeah, like we're living through a worldwide pandemic, of course. So this almost feels like a little ingenuine to me, right? So like let's open this and see what we got going on. So yeah, I mean like I love the idea of meeting people where they're at and really like resonating with the experience that people are having. And I think that's what this writer was trying to do here of like, hey, what's the thing that's on people's minds? It's the fact that we're living through some weird shit right now. But this feels disingenuous. I would love to see more of like a personal twist to this, right? So instead of this sort of like generic opener, I would love, either for Dan himself or for the writer to essentially have said like, hey, here is why this has been a unique time for me, right? Because then it gives it that personal element of an email, right? Because email is a very personal thing. And then it also kind of gives the reader the space to resonate with that on their own. So instead of saying like, hey, I know exactly what you're going through, it's more like, hey, this is the thing that I'm going through. Does that resonate with you? Is that something that you're experiencing as well, right? So I used to work with a New York Times bestselling author who would teach other people to become authors themselves, right? And one of the things that he talked about was this thing called the come alongside method. And essentially, instead of saying, hey, here's the thing you're going through, or here's the thing I want you to understand from this piece of writing that I'm sharing with you, and like kind of beating the reader over the head with it, he would kind of preach this method of really pulling the reader up next to you and saying like, hey, look at this thing. We're both looking at this thing right now. What do you think we can learn from this? And kind of like coming alongside that person and helping them understand the thing instead of, kind of punching them in the face with it, if that makes sense. Okay. So we might go back to that one and see if there's a way to improve it. Let's go over here to promotions and see what we got going on. For a lot of these, it makes sense why they ended up in promotions. 20% off, 59% off. The subject lines are very promotion-y. I don't think that's a word, but I think you know what I'm saying. I like this. I like this too. I don't even know, like, what donkey butters means. I love the phrase thigh slappers. Okay. I want to break this down. There's just not like a ton of... Okay, we're going to do it. We're going to break it down anyway. There's not a ton of copy here, but I'm going to see if we can make sense of what makes this email good. And the reason I'm going to break it down is because I literally just laughed out loud organically, right? Like, this email is funny, and I think that because of that, there's something to learn from it. So here we go. Subject line. Knowing a little bit about the brand itself, like the thing about Birddogs is that they make shorts and pants or whatever that have built-in underwear. So they're like supposed to be comfortable as heck. I would like to buy a pair. But this is like a very, I guess it's more of a feature or a feature subject line than a benefit, which is interesting. So basically, like, just to break that down a little bit more, feature is like, this is a ceramic cup, right? The benefit of that would be, and I don't know that this is an actual benefit of ceramic, but an example would be, this is a ceramic cup, which is the feature. The benefit would be, so it keeps your drink warmer for longer, so you don't have to continually go back and forth between your desk and your microwave, right? So that's just kind of an example. This works, and I'm trying to figure out why it works. I think it's because this is their whole USP. Like, this is their USP in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that 6 words? Yeah, in 6 words. So I really like that aspect of it too. And I think one thing that I've noticed from this email and from seeing a couple of like Birddogs ads is that they're a very like straightforward brand. They're not trying to do anything like subliminally. They're just kind of like straight up telling you like, hey, here's our deal. Get the fuck in or get the fuck out. Excuse my language. But as you can see, that's the brand, right? So yeah, this subject line works, I think, just because it exemplifies their voice and it puts their USP front and center, right? So if you are someone who kind of like resonates with their tone of voice, this is going to be interesting to you. And also, if you're part of their target market, you're going to see this USP and say, oh, wow, that sounds awesome. I'm interested in learning more about that, right? So I think that's really cool. So PSA, Birddog pants have built-in undies. Here are 3 other things to do in your pants while you're trapped inside. I wonder if the word pants here is unique because I know they started with shorts, I'm pretty sure. So I think the phrase pants is kind of letting you as a new customer or as a previous customer know that, hey, it's not just our shorts that have this feature, it's our pants too. So that's kind of cool. Here are 3 other things to do in your pants while you're trapped inside. Okay, so this is kind of what I was talking about with that Dan Miller email, right? Of like him saying, or that writer or whoever wrote that email saying, hey, we're going through, these unique and interesting times. That feels disingenuous. But what they're trying to do is meet the reader where they're at, right? They're trying to resonate with the experience that people are having to draw them into the email. and then kind of transition into, hey, here's why your experience is relevant to this thing that we're doing. So I think this is what that email was trying to do. That Dan Miller email, it was trying to do something like this. So here are 3 other things to do in your pants while you're trapped inside. They're not beating you over the head with this idea of like, hey, we're in quarantine, we're living through a pandemic, these times are weird, aren't they? I'm not saying like that's bad. Like I wrote copy like that at the beginning of all of this, but I think we're to the point now where it's kind of becoming a little like cliche. People read that and they're like, oh, okay, what are you about to sell me? Right? But with this, it's subtle. It's saying like, hey, you're trapped inside. Here's how our product is related to that. And not like, it's not beating you over the head with the whole pandemic thing, which is cool. Watch hours of SpongeBob and try to figure out who's gay in these heat sacks. Okay. I guess I'm trying to figure out what the hell is happening here. So it feels like heat sacks are what they're calling these pants. And trying to figure out who's gay, I guess, is they're insinuating that a SpongeBob character is gay. So you can wear these pants and watch SpongeBob while you try to figure out which of their characters is gay. Okay. It's unique. This one to me is not like fully clear. And maybe I'm just not hip. This is making me feel kind of like a fucking old person or a nerd, but maybe this would resonate with someone who actually understands the brand a little bit better. I don't know. But this is like, I guess this is 2 concepts that are new to me. Like trying to figure out who's gay in a SpongeBob episode and also heat sacks are both 2 new things. Whereas if it was like one new concept, like if they were saying, try to figure out something else and then also using the phrase heat sacks, that might still be like, that might not be too much of a jump for me to understand. But the way that it is now, it feels like there's 2 connections that I'm missing and having to make on my own. So that feels a little bit rough. Get dumped on Zoom in these donkey butters. Okay. Donkey butters is also, and I don't understand. I do like, here's what I do like though. It's almost like this email is playing into meme culture a little bit, right? So like I love memes, and I feel like that's kind of what we're talking about here. It's like introducing new phrases and concepts that don't make total sense, but like when you read it, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of get that. And also, it's a little bit like cynical in a way, right? Like here's something that you can do in our pants. You can get dumped on Zoom. Like that's pretty funny. Cool. Okay. This I think is my favorite one. It's the strongest one, and partially maybe it's just because it's like the one that I understand. Steve Jobs. Okay. Put on these thigh slappers. I love that. And throw a massive rager for your plants. I like that too. Because I understand this one, right? I think that's why this is strong, and I think that's why I don't know. This is strong because I don't have to make any new connections. Like I just understand what this says immediately, right? So I think one of the big things to take away from this email is like clarity always wins. Like I kind of like these first 2, but I don't fully understand, right? It took me a second to fully understand what they were saying, right? Whereas with this one, I know what it means immediately, and I think it's hilarious. Like it's a unique idea of throwing a party for your plants. That's funny as shit. Now, this is the part that like really made me laugh and I think drew me to the email in the first place. So who cares anyway? We're all gonna die, and now there's aliens. Like that's funny as shit. And I think that also ties into this idea of like meme culture too, right? Like it's cynical, it's unique, it's funny. Yeah, and it also, again, it's like meeting people where they're at. It's talking about this whole weird pandemic thing without beating somebody over the head with it. Because it's not saying like, it's not using this to like blatantly transition to a pitch, right? Like this is a button, but there's nothing that says click. So you could argue that that's maybe like bad direct response marketing, but also you could argue that it's really good branding, right? So I think that's fun. Join our guild or get the fuck out. I think that's great. So yeah, I think with these last two things, what's really cool is, one second, is that it's like really playing up the brand's voice. It's not like pulling any punches. It's not trying to be super clever. It's just saying like, hey, here's who we are. You're either about it or you're not. So that's really cool. So I think really there are two big takeaways here. So the first is clarity, right? So like these first two GIFs or, explanations about these pants, like were funny, but they didn't really land for me because they weren't entirely clear. Now, maybe I'm not entirely the audience, but I am a white dude in his 20s who was enticed by this subject line. So I think for these, it's almost like you have to make two connections, and that's too many. So for this one, it's like watch hours of SpongeBob and try to figure out who's gay. That's a new concept to me. In these heat sacks, also a new concept to me. Get dumped on Zoom. Like the way that this reads right now, like when I first read this, I thought it said get dumped on in Zoom. And I was like, what does that mean? Right? And then Donkey Butters, also funny, but a new concept for me, right? So these two were interesting, but didn't entirely land because I had to make too many connections in my brain. And the first time I read it, I wasn't sure what it meant. Whereas this last one is super strong, in my opinion, because I know exactly what it means. So I don't have to think about it before I can laugh. Like I can read it and I can say, oh shit, that's funny. And the same with these, right? Like, who cares anyways? We're all going to die and now there's aliens. Very clear, very simple. And same with this, like join our guild or get the fuck out. Very clear, very simple, very direct. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind with any email that you're writing is like, be clear, be direct, be simple. Don't make people have to think about what you are writing, because if they have to think about it, if they have to stop reading and they have to start thinking, then you've lost them, right? And then I think the other thing is like, don't be afraid to be unique or to play up your brand's voice, right? So like, even though these first two things didn't fully land for me, like this whole last section of the email made me laugh out loud, right? And it's the reason that we're breaking it down right now. So like leaning into your voice can be super powerful. So don't be afraid to do that, provided that you are also being clear and direct and writing copy that is simple. So anyway, yeah, I think those are the two big takeaways from this email. Be clear and direct, and don't be afraid to use your voice, provided you are following step number one, being clear and direct. So hope that's helpful, and until next time, talk to you later.